Investment legend Jim Rogers, or better known by many Chinese as the father of Happy and B. Rogers. Welcome to our show this morning. And we are very honored to have you, not only an investment veteran who's been consistently optimistic about China and Asia, but also someone who has been consistently right as well. China has essentially resorted to this very Keynesian way of economic rescue plan. FDR resorted to the New Deal. Isn't the better way for the U.S. to effectively use the money that's printed essentially by the central bank to invest in infrastructure?
Well, that's a very extremely good question, Shirley. I first went to China in 1984, back to what some of you said before, and I was really very scared because I'd been listening to American propaganda all my life that the Chinese were evil, vicious, bloodthirsty people. I got there and I found that no, they're not. They're educated, cultured, hardworking. They save their money, and they have a long culture of success. China is the only country in world history that's had recurring periods of greatness. Rome was great once. Britain was great once. Egypt was great once. But China's been great 3 or 4 times. China's absolutely collapsed 3 or 4 times. But every time, for some reason, China's at the bottom and then turns around and rises to the top again. So when you said before I'm optimistic about China, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with China. You know, China does this, not anybody else. And that's why I have been optimistic. That's why we moved to Asia. That's why my children speak Mandarin, because I'm preparing them for the 21st century. At the moment, you know, there are problems between the U.S. and China. Whenever in history politicians have problems, they blame foreigners, and the Americans are blaming China right now. I don't like it. I'm an American. I'm very keen on America, but I do see what's happening. And in my view, it's a mistake to blame foreigners anytime, because foreigners usually, if countries work together, they raise great prosperity for each other. America and China have both grown together a lot in the last 30 or 40 years, and that could and should continue, and I hope will eventually. At the moment, America's having problems, and so America's printing a lot of money, as you pointed out, and borrowing a lot of money, which in my view is, again, I'm an American. I hate to see it because it's leaving my children with a huge problem. America's the largest debtor nation in the world right now, Shirley, and it's getting higher every day by leaps and bounds. It's staggering what's happening. And my poor children who are young, I don't know how America's ever going to recover from all of this debt and all of this closing off that's taking place. So I wish America would not do what it's doing. I wish that America, if it's going to spend money, would spend money on developing infrastructure. China's spending money too, but you seem to be spending it better. You're spending it on infrastructure. In America, we're just spending it on making sure people have jobs, which is great for the people, but it's not good for the long-term growth of America. I worry about America. I hope that America and China work together again. I hope that this closing off stops after the election, and I hope that America and China continue to grow and prosper together. Maybe I spoke too long. Did I answer your question?
Of course, but on this infrastructure question, Jim, of course, rationally, I think a portion of the central bank's money that's been printed through the system should go into infrastructure. Now, Huawei, as a typical example, Huawei is not only the de facto global leader, I think, in 5G telecom equipment and telecom infrastructure, but also it's becoming sort of this geopolitical front line of U.S.-China competition today. And so I think few people really realize the fact that no American companies is actually in the 5G global infrastructure race. And so essentially, if the U.S. blacklists Huawei, I can understand, fine, that's because of competition, but the U.S. is essentially helping the Ericssons, Nokias, and the Samsungs of the world to edge up in this global competitive race. Where does America stand fundamentally in this global 5G race altogether?
Well, from what I read of people I know who are knowledgeable about technology, America's behind. I certainly know in many things America's behind technologically. I know that 20 years ago, the Scandinavians were ahead of us as far as the internet is concerned. What people tell me, China's ahead, Huawei is ahead of America. And instead of competing in the economic field, America is using politicians. And the same with TikTok. I mean, who cares about TikTok? but America's behind. So America says they're evil people, and we're going to give American companies an advantage. This is not the way America became a great, successful, and powerful nation, but this is the way history has always worked. 100 years ago, America learned technology from the English, and we became the most important country in the world by learning English technology and transferring it to America. America's doing the same now, at least as far as the people I know who know about technology. It's because America's behind, in many things, and America is using politicians instead of an economic playing field. It's not the way the world is supposed to work, but the world has worked that way often throughout history. China produces something like 10 times as many engineers, or maybe 20 times as many engineers as America does every year. They're not all good engineers. Some of them are obviously very, very good engineers. So in America, we need to improve our education. We need to improve a lot of things so that we can compete on a level playing field. I don't like saying any of this, Shirley. Congratulations to the Chinese engineers. You've done a good job.
Well, you talked a lot about history, Jim. Essentially, if we look at the long span of global history, it is fundamentally technology that gives the world a major economic breakout every time with every wave of major industrial or technological revolution. So today, do you think 5G, since it's so much in the global debate, is that 5G that sort of technology, you think?
Telecommunications, call it what you will, internet, electronics, call it what you will, is where we are. 200 years ago, it was the railroad and the steam engine. The British developed the steam engine. At one time in the 1830s, the parts of England had more machines than the whole world, everybody in the whole world, because they immediately jumped on technology, which was machinery at the time, and became a great economic powerhouse. And they took the sailboats. They were great sailors, but the Spanish and the Portuguese had been the great sailors before, and even the Chinese, except the Chinese closed it down. And so the English started sailing around the world with their technology and took over the world. And America started copying the technology, and the rest of the story. At the moment, it's not machinery and sailing, it's electronics or telecommunications, call it what you will. And for whatever reason, and I'm not knowledgeable, for whatever reason, the Chinese seem to be ahead of the rest of us. I know as far as money is concerned and paying for things, money is on the computer, on the phone in China. I tried to buy an ice cream in Beijing the other day. I had money. I had renminbi. The woman couldn't take money. She wanted my phone. Poor woman gave me the ice cream in the end. She was so embarrassed and didn't know what. So China's way ahead of us in many things. Congratulations. And as far as I can see, that's continuing. Again, I don't like it because I'm American and I would like for America to be competitive and to keep up. But it's a fact. China's doing very well with all those thousands of engineers you produce every year.
Well, sometimes when you move to China, and especially like what you said, Jim, having to do everything on WeChat, it does make an American feel like moving into the future in China in many ways.
By the way, Shirley, I now have WeChat. I do have money on my phone, and so I can buy you an ice cream if I'm in China.
But Jim, you talked about the shift of global technological leadership. China has recently launched this very ambitious plan called the China Standards 2035, and that's essentially aiming for China to build itself into the global leadership position for the technologies of the 21st century. And we have just referred to Internet of Things, AI, including biotech, and certainly including 5G. And I think that is a very ambitious plan, but in your view, is that realistic as well?
Well, of course it's realistic. As I said, you produce thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of engineers every year, and some of them are very small. But Shirley, everybody in the world has ambitions like this. If you go to America, every state has a plan to by 2025 or 2030 to be a technological leader. I travel a lot. Korea, everywhere, every nation has a plan that it wants to develop its technology and its leadership, and everybody is doing all they can to do it, including China. Not everybody can be number one. Not everybody can even be in the top three. You can ask me in 20 years.
And Jim, if every country is trying its best to be competitive, especially in cutting-edge global technologies, isn't that a sort of a good news? That's a sense of optimism for the world, isn't it?
Well, as far as I'm going to, I've read a lot of history, and I know that competition is great. The reason that America grew was because they had to compete with the English, and they had to do it better and cheaper. And we did. We did it better and cheaper, and the English made lots of mistakes. All right, I know what China's doing is very good. I hope that China doesn't close off. You know, if China closes off, it's not going to be good for China. It's not going to be good for the world. You know Jack Ma. Well, look at Huawei. 20 years ago, Jack Ma went into his apartment and started doing the thing with a computer. Nobody knew what he was talking about. He had to compete. He did. Look at Huawei. Same thing. These guys had to compete. They did. And it was good for China. They built gigantic success stories. Now, America's got some great success stories too, but that's competition that made people great, not closing off. Closing off has never led to much progress.
So talking about some other countries, particularly countries in the center of this global geopolitical debate here, and some of these traditional U.S. allies in the Atlantic West use Huawei again as an example. How persuasive you think the U.S. today in the 21st century, in 2020, has over its allies in terms of its economic and moral leadership?
Shirley, America is the largest economy in the world right now. America has staggering amounts of money, and the person with a lot of money has a lot of influence, whether it's for good or for bad. You know that the English language became powerful because of England, had a lot of influence. It replaced the French language as the world's international language. My reading of history and the way the world has always worked, if you are open and if somebody comes in with something new, you adopt it, and then you get better and better as well. Like Jack Ma, he saw this thing called the internet, went into his apartment and adapted and competed. And look at the rest of the story. That's what's happened with America. Some of our great stories. You know, the automobile. The Germans came up with the automobile 150 years ago. Well, Henry Ford took it and made it great. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're open and receptive to new ideas and new competition. We had a horrible time in the 1930s because everybody closed off. Let's hope it doesn't happen again.
China has just launched its 2025 plan. By 2025, there are going to be 460 million 5G connected users. That's 1.2 times of the entire population of the United States. Not only China is now a major first mover in the 5G infrastructure building, but with it, we have to see that this enormous drive for China to accumulate data. China will be a first mover in essentially amassing the world's possibly the biggest amount of data, turning it into an AI superpower. How would the U.S. catch up and stay competitive in this race?
I would hope that America would adjust, adapt, and accept new technology, because if you take the new technology, then your engineers, whether you're British, Australian, or whatever you are, you will make progress too. That's the best way for the world to develop. History shows it over and over again, that we will all be better off. I mean, the railroad came along and everybody adapted and adjusted and competed, and the railroad changed the world. That's the way technology and economics and society is supposed to work. So I would hope that everyone, the British, to use them again, would say, hey, let's jump on this bandwagon and do it too. Let's go to China and see what they're doing, or let's let the Chinese come here. America would, and we would all work together. We would all go into the factories and work, and who cares who makes the most technological progress? All of us will benefit if there's technological progress. Instead of closing it and say, we're not going to use it because it comes from England, is insane. America said, gosh, they're great. Let's use it. And we did, and we competed. And that's the way countries and the world makes progress. But I want to say again, Shirley, I hope China doesn't close off too. Right now, the Indians are closing off. I mean, it's unbelievable to me what the Indians are doing. The Indians, they have a lot of engineers, and they should be accepting and embracing. But I see signs in many countries of people closing off.
it's true that China is quickly closing this gap. And of course, that's the world's largest economy. It's natural to feel, well, a sense of urgency there, rather than China coming closer to the US way of doing business. And now the US is saying, well, we need to get closer to China's way, and we need to use a whole of government approach, essentially, to have this state-led economic development. And so for the 21st century, is that where we are going? Essentially, it's going to be heavy government intervention and heavy state-led investment for the 21st century.
Unfortunately, you happen to be right. You see what's going on in the world. I just mentioned India. You mentioned some of the English-speaking countries before. People are reacting and getting defensive. But Shirley, in the 19th century, everybody opened, and there was international trade and capital flows of ideas and technology, and the world got better and better. Then in the 20th century, after the First World War, everybody closed off, and you know the rest of the story. We had depression, we had war, we had disaster. In 1945, we said, we're never going to do that again, and everybody started opening up. And Deng Xiaoping, I mentioned him before, said, let's open up. Let's try something new. Deng Xiaoping said, you open the window, you're going to get some flies, but you're also going to get fresh air and sunshine, and everybody will be better off. And that's what happened. But now you see that people are saying those other people are evil, and we don't want to compete. We want to have it our way. Whether your way or our way or their way is best, doesn't matter. Let everybody do it their own way, take ideas from each other, take advancements from each other, and we all get better and better. That's the way it should be. Unfortunately, history shows it's not always that way. Sometimes people just say, get rid of those foreigners. They're evil.
Well, Jim, I can see you have been mentioning this point a couple of times now about the possibility of China potentially resorting to a protectionist policy as well. As the U.S. turning more trade protectionist and more economically protectionist, I think that's perhaps giving China the counter force for China to push its policy towards more self-reliance as well. Is that going to eventually lead to China towards maybe perhaps more of an economic closure some point down the road?
Well, it may well be. There's some things you cannot do in China that you can do in the rest of the world. You know, some of the internet things. But I'm going to use another example. Right now, America puts sanctions on Russia, and every morning Russian farmers wake up and say, thank you, America. Thank you for the sanctions, because Russian agriculture is booming. They have to, because they cannot buy from America and they cannot sell to America. So but in 10 years, Shirley, American farmers are going to say, wait a minute, what happened? Now Russia's a great agricultural power again. How did this happen? But America's forcing them to by closing off. And so Russia's becoming self-reliant, independent. And that's not going to be good for America in the long run. Well, the same with closing off to Chinese technology. You know, we're saying to Huawei, you must go away. Well, someday Huawei is going to be totally self-reliant, and America's going to say, wait a minute, how did this happen? What happened? You know, but we, America, like we're making Russian agriculture great. We're going to do the same thing with some technology. We're going to force other countries, whether it's Korea or China or whoever, to develop their own technology, and that's going to hurt America in the long run. It always has, and it will again.
But not necessarily, as you referred to in the Russian scenario, it may not necessarily be a 100% bad thing. I mean, this sort of U.S. protectionist policy for the target countries such as China, particularly in its technology.
China should not close off either. You know, if I were China, and I'm not, there's no reason for you to listen to me. When these things happen, if I were China, I would say, okay, you do it your way. We're going to continue to open up. We're going to bring in outside technology. We're going to bring in outside ideas. You do it your way if you want to. We're going to do it our way. So far, China's been somewhat restrained, but I see signs that China might close too. Again, everybody may wind up being totally independent 20 years from now. But the world is better off if we're all working together instead of working independently.
China is going to make the domestic supply and demand economic cycle as the main killer of economic growth for, leading to the 14th Five-Year Plan now. But at the same time, I think just a few days ago, the Chinese leader, Xi himself has made this clear affirmation to the world that China will continue to open up, although putting the domestic economy as the main pillar of economic growth. That doesn't mean that China is going to close off. But do you think that rationale, that economic rationale, makes sense? That on one hand, we're going to be more self-reliant, and on the other hand, we're going to continue to open up?
Well, you can have it both ways. Yes, you can open up, but then you will learn from other people and you will develop your own way. That's the way the world has worked, and it has been good for countries. But, some people say we're opening up, and at the same time, they're closing some doors over here, they're closing some windows over here. As long as they open up, and if China accepts outside ideas, outside technology, outside capital, China's opening its capital markets, for instance. We'll talk about that for a minute. They're opening them more and more. Just this week, they opened their bond market more. Open markets throughout history have been good for everybody. And China says they're doing it, and they are doing it in many ways. I hope that they're not also closing off.
But basically, you are saying it's not just U.S. or China taking numbers. Every country is turning protectionist. Every country wants to be competitive. Every country is coming up with their own. But there will be many, many different universes. Isn't that the case? How does this decoupled world really look like?
Well, the world can go either way. And since 1945, most places have opened up more and more. It's been great for the world. Look at China. Deng Xiaoping took amazing steps in China, and many, many, many people became extraordinarily successful because Deng Xiaoping opened up China. Korea, look at Korea. Korea was a disaster 50 years ago, and now look at Korea. So it can work for everybody's benefit, but you can also close off. I'm not going to give it, but throughout history, there have been many examples of countries that have closed off and gone into decline. In 1962, Burma was the richest country in Asia. They closed off in 1962, said, get rid of the foreigners. 50 years later, Myanmar was the poorest country in Asia because they went and closed up. Myanmar is now opening up again. But history shows it doesn't help when you get rid of the foreigners and you throw out the foreigners. And I hope that everybody says, let our companies go there and learn. Let our companies license each other's technology. That has been good for the world throughout history.
Jim, a lot of people refer to the current state of U.S.-China relationship as a Cold War 2.0. I think you are sometimes even referring to the current in many similar ways to the 1930s, which in economic terms, it was much worse than the Cold War period. The Cold War period was actually not such a bad period for a global economy. And so are we going back to the 1930s, you think?
Well, there are certainly signs that we are. Right now there's an election in the United States. Both parties have said we're going to bash China as a way to win the election. And this has always happened in history all over the world. Countries, politicians blame the problems on foreigners. Let's hope that after November, both parties stop bashing foreign countries. But it's not just China. It's mainly China, but we bash Germany, we bash Korea, Japan, Mexico. American politicians are blaming the problems on many other countries. Let's hope that stops after the election. But surely there are signs that it might continue. India, let me go back to India. India is the second largest country in the world. India desperately needs outside capital and ideas and technology. But even the Indians are starting to say, let's close off. That's not good for anybody.
Certainly, on the topic of U.S. election, if there were a Trump term number 2, would that be a tougher term for China, you think?
Well, if you know what Mr. Trump says, you know what he does, chances are if he is elected and doesn't have to worry about being reelected, that he might be more receptive to the outside world. At times he has been. He used to do. When he was a private citizen, he used to do huge amounts of business in China and with China. Let's hope that he goes back to that again. There are people in Washington who know that international trade and investment is good. There are people who do know that the Chinese invested a lot in America. There are many American jobs because of China. So I would hope that when the pressures of the election are finished, if whoever wins, that then we could go back to a more rational and open society, an open economy. Will we? I don't know. You can ask me in 20 years.
So if I understand correctly, if President Trump were to be in the White House for another term, there could be some real deals on the table, wouldn't it? It could have been an easier time, possibly.
Well, I would hope so. One problem is that, many people in Washington were very much in favor of opening up. Unfortunately, many of those have left. And the people who left with Mr. Trump sort of are the people who are saying, let's close off, let's close off. So let's hope that if whoever wins, that people come back to Washington who are in favor of opening up instead of closing.
So if there were a level of global financial crisis, economic crisis, as you refer to, possibly the worst in your lifetime, wouldn't that sort of monetary policy space that China has allowed today essentially give China a safety cushion if, in case the world does turn into a economic meltdown?
Well, I'm delighted you brought it up. It's good insight on your part. Yes, China's certainly done a less bad job, if you ask me. In Japan, they're printing staggering amounts of money and staggering amounts of debt. We in America, I have young children. What kind of world is it going to be for them as Americans? Because America was the largest debtor nation in the world 6 months ago. Surely since then, America's added staggering amounts of debt and continues to do every day and printing a lot of money. China has been less bad. China has not. I mean, you still have interest rates in China. Sure, China's printed money, but nothing like Japan, nothing like America. Yeah, China has built infrastructure, but nothing like what we're doing in America. So China has been less bad of what's going on. In the end, of course, if you ask me, looking at history, China's going to come out better or less bad because they haven't printed huge amounts of money and gone deeper and deeper into debt. Surely my children, I'm going to inherit a country when they're adults, which has unbelievable amounts of debt. Who's going to pay that debt? I know what happened to England when they did this 100 years ago or 90 years ago. They went into serious decline. It's still there, but it's nothing like what it was. This China, I hope that the Chinese central bank continues to show restraint. I hope that Beijing continues to show restraint. But I also hope Beijing opens up. They opened up the bond market last week. I hope they open everything, the financial markets, the stock market, all markets, commodity markets, the currency markets, because it will be good for China if they do so.
Mm-hmm. In this process of further liberalization of the financial market, what would you think will be the logical first step in this process that we have seen in China's reform process? It's very gradual rather than just going for a shock therapy type of thing.
Well, it has been gradual. It's been too gradual, if you ask me, but I'm not Chinese. Deng Xiaoping said you cross the stream by one step at a time. You find the rocks and you carefully cross the stream. Well, that's what China has been doing. In 2005, you started opening up the financial markets. Well, that's been 15 years. You're still doing it. But surely, if I were doing it, this afternoon, I would open up everything. But I'm not Chinese. Deng Xiaoping was smarter than I am. So you're doing it your way. But I don't. This is not 1920. This is 2020. China's an extremely strong, successful country. I would open all your financial markets now. But surely I cannot tell Beijing what to do. I don't want to tell anybody what to do. I've written some books about Japan recently, explaining what they're doing wrong. But I cannot tell Japan what to do. I don't want to. I wish I could tell Washington what to do, but they don't. Nobody listens. So I hope China continues, and good luck to China. Good luck to America. Good luck to everybody who opens up.
Of course. So if, let's say, hypothetically, Jim, if we were to open up China's interest rate regime and exchange regime all of a sudden, what would be the risks, you think, that comes to the economy?
Well, you asked me, there's very little risk. I think what Beijing is afraid of is if they open the currency market, the renminbi may go down. And it might, because a lot of people want to get their money out of China. But you know what, Shirley? There are people like me who would say, I want to buy when China, I want to put more money into China. And so, yes, let the renminbi go down for a while as some people want out. There are other people who would want to get in, like me. I would be waiting to buy. And the market would, in the end, I hate to tell you, but the market is smarter than all the bureaucrats in the world, even in China. And so you might have dislocations, short-term dislocations, but you have short-term dislocations when everything is controlled. So sure, let it go down. There's some people who'd be willing to buy.
Let the invisible hand that takes control. But I would...
Well done, Shirley. Well done. Yes, perfect.
I would even arguably say that a weaker currency is actually good for export, especially when China is under so much pressure to buy so many more U.S. goods these days.
Well, of course. I mean, we all know that a cheapened currency makes it easier to buy things from and to sell, and to sell things abroad. So it makes it easier for farmers to buy. So yes, there is an argument that it would be actually good for China if the currency went down. Well, if it goes down, China, Shirley, I am going to be buying. I have great confidence in the future of the renminbi during my children's lifetime.
Very interesting. And Jim, talking about 2020, it's actually rather interesting to watch global capital flow mobilities here. And so on one hand, we started to see 2020 actually has been vibrant in terms of Chinese companies getting listed in the US. And so all of a sudden, we started to see, despite all these tensions and COVID-19 changing everything, money is money. Money continues to look for de-risked assets, safest market, and economic growth opportunities, isn't it?
That's what capital likes to do. Capital likes to find a place where it can have a good return and safety. Capital is pretty neutral. Capital doesn't know politics and doesn't care. Well, they care because they want safety. They want to go to a place where their money is safe and where they can get a good return. And at the moment, many people think that certainly, you see what's happening in Hong Kong, many people think that China is a place like that. I hope that continues. And if China continues to open up, there will be more money flowing into China, not flowing out. You know what you just said, what's happening in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong IPO market is booming. People want to put their money there.
You talked about you are bullish on the RMB, Jim. One of the major, I think, reform policy this year is the launch of the imminent launch, I should say, of the sovereign digital currency. And so, with everything being test piloted all across major cities in China, it looks like it's a pretty well-established act these days. You know, all the things that we have heard about, it's gone quite successfully. And so, is that sovereign digital currency a fundamental global currency game changer, you think?
Well, back to technology. Technology is changing. Money is going to be on the computer. I told you before, I couldn't buy an ice cream in China with money. It's all on the computer. That is going to happen all over the world. Governments love it because they don't have to, money's expensive. You have to print it, you have to transport it, you have to account for it, you have to make it safe and secure. The money's on the computer, on the internet. It's good for governments and they love it. So that's going to happen worldwide, and it's going to be government money, some kind of government money worldwide. It will certainly be easier for capital flows if the markets are open, So in the future, we're going to see more and more of that. Again, I don't like to say it, but China's ahead of us, ahead of America, as far as putting monies on the computer, ahead of most of the world. Every country's working on it now. Every central bank, and nearly every central bank in the world now is working on putting its currency on the internet, and it will happen. That is certainly the future. Having money in your pocket is going to disappear soon. I mean, I know that Chinese people don't even have wallets. because everything's on your phone. You need a phone. You don't need a wallet, and that's going to continue.
A lot of the current mechanisms doesn't really reflect China's ambition or China's status, I think, within the global economy currently. So do you think with the sovereign digital currency, it is in a way going to potentially helping China to establish a global monetary multilateral framework, essentially with the RMB as a lender of resort at some point in time?
Well, yeah, Shirley, but right now the renminbi is still a blocked currency. I mean, if I want to buy Australian dollars, I just buy them, instantly. But you cannot do that with China and the renminbi because it's still a blocked currency. Again, this is 2020. This is not 1920. If I were China, I would open it today and make it a completely convertible and freely tradable currency. China will be, and the renminbi may well replace the US dollar someday. But surely it cannot now. It's a blocked currency. If I want to buy and sell renminbi, oh my gosh, it's complicated and difficult. It has been opening. It is opening. But I would do it today if I were China. You have to tell Beijing, don't listen to me. Beijing's doing it its way. But once they do it, surely, once the renminbi is freely tradable and freely convertible, the world is going to change dramatically. Many people in the world are looking for something to compete with the US dollar. There is no real viable currency right now. The British pound, even the euro, the yen, nothing can really compete with the US dollar right now. But if and when the renminbi is freely convertible, the world will change dramatically. That's why if I were Beijing, I'd do it today. But they don't have to listen to me, Shirley, and they're not going to listen to me.
Well, I can certainly see that the patience is running out a bit on your end, Jim. So I think the Chinese central bank might be just taking your advice. Just talked about printing money is no longer sustainable, and then we come into this whole global crisis. Do you have a timeline for it? Should we watch for some cues about it? At what point should the world, or following your advice, we are nearing the end?
Well, Shirley, in 2008, the world had a big problem because of too much debt. Debt was very high. Shirley, since 2008, debt all over the world has skyrocketed. Oh my gosh, Japan, America, even China. Even China has debt now. You didn't have much debt 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but even China has debt now. So the next time we have a problem, and we always have throughout history, it's going to be horrible. It's going to be the worst in my lifetime. I'm older than you, Shirley, so it's going to be the worst in your lifetime too. Because the debt everywhere is staggering. And we're all going to pay a terrible price for all this money printing and borrowing and spending. I don't like saying it, as I said, but it's got to happen. It always has, and the debt is booming. It's not going to be fun next time, Shirley. A lot of people won't survive. I hope I survive. I hope my family survives. It's going to be very bad for everybody.
What would be the advice you give to Chinese policymakers? How do you prepare for this sort of crisis?
I would make the markets completely open and freely tradable so money can go where it best wants to go. But I would also keep the debt down. China has not been going as deeply into debt as Japan or America or some other countries in the last year or two. I would continue that policy. I would continue to try to keep the debt under control, and I would make the currency markets open and convert. Very simple policy. China has a strong economy. Now, Shirley, of course there are going to be problems in China too. Of course people will go bankrupt in China. But that's the way the world is supposed to work. The world is supposed to, when people fail, to go bankrupt and start over. So it's going to happen in China, but let it happen. It's not the end of the world. China's been around a few thousand years. You will survive.
Global supply chain, Jim. One of the key campaign messages of President Trump is to move 100,000 American jobs out of China back onshore. Is that doable? What do you think American companies are doing today? Do you think American companies will follow the advice?
They will do it if Mr. Trump pays them to do it. And Mr. Trump, so far America cannot compete with Korea or some places as far as manufacturing centers, even Vietnam, as far as some things are concerned. But if somehow or another, and Mr. Trump says he will give you tax breaks, well, if Mr. Trump pays you to come back, of course people will come back if it's economically viable. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to see much of it. I don't think you're going to see televisions produced in America again, unless somehow or another Mr. Trump pays. But Shirley, if that happens, that's not good for America, because in the end, somebody has to pay for it. And if the government pays a company to make televisions in America, American citizens are going to pay for that in the end, and America becomes a less competitive nation. A much less competitive nation. And young Americans are going to have a future, the same future that young British had in the 1920s, a nation which is in decline relatively. And yeah, it can happen. Should it happen? Of course not. But might it happen? Could happen. Sure. It's not good, but it could happen.
It's not a happy scenario, obviously, for you to talk about America's relative decline in the 21st century. I don't think so. But you have been talking about your conviction about the rise of the Asian century. And so, Jim, would any U.S. president, not only President Trump, any future U.S. president, ever accept this scenario during his or her term? China overtakes the United States as the largest economy in the world.
China will become the largest economy in the world eventually, not per capita. That will take a long, long time for China to become per capita the largest economy in the world. But sure, it's happening. I mean, these are simple facts. Can politicians accept it? Every politician throughout history all over the world blames problems on foreigners. You blame the foreigners. The foreigners have different language, different skin, different food, different everything. So it's easy to blame the foreigners. And American politicians will blame the Chinese. Yes, China continues just like British politicians blamed their problems on America. America did rise. America did become successful, but it was because of hard work and saving, being innovative. And that's what's happening in China. So other people blame foreigners. Is it good? No, Shirley, but it's the way people are. It's easy to blame the foreigners.
Well, you have talked about, Jim, the world, it seems to be on a trend to turning more protectionist, and we have seen it in the 1920s and 30s, and it certainly was the darkest moment, I should say, of the 20th century. But unfortunately, it seems that we are entering into that phase psychologically again. But it's necessary that we have to also recognize the fact that we're just going to be in here for a while before the world reconverges again. But what would be the cue? What would be the signal that you will be looking for that perhaps at that point that the world has a chance to reconverge again?
If somehow the American Congress and the American president said, all right, we're going to open everything up. We're all going to dance to TikTok. Shirley, can you believe that America is screaming about TikTok, about 17-year-old boys and girls dancing to my kids love TikTok. I didn't realize TikTok was some kind of threat to America or to India. I mean, this is lunacy, if you ask me.
For your privacy.
What?
Did you think it violated your privacy?
Not at all. What do I care about that my daughters are watching TikTok and Billy? My daughters are on Billy. I didn't realize this was some kind of threat to my prosperity and privacy and safety. No, of course not. If I ever see the American Congress all watching TikTok and Billy, then I'll think, well, maybe things are getting better again and not worse. But China has to do it. China has to open up too, I said we talked before about the Chinese capital markets. There's no reason for the Chinese capital markets to be closed. There's no reason for any Chinese markets to be closed. Jack Ma went into his apartment because China was open to new technology and built a gigantic company, Tencent, you know the names as well as I do, Huawei, because the markets were open. China needs to continue to open, not close, not just America, everybody.
And give a scorecard of Huawei's founder, Zhengfei, how you think of what he's achieved and what he's doing in tackling this economic or technological sanction from the U.S.
Shirley, as I said, my 12-year-old daughter knows more about technology than I do, but I can see the result. The whole world can see the results. He has built a gigantic, successful company. He didn't do it with luck. He did it with hard work and good engineers and good thinking. I don't know any more than that, except I can see the results. We all can. He must be doing something right, and I hope that he continues. I hope that China and America and the world work together so that Huawei becomes even more extraordinary and even more successful. Unfortunately, that's not the way some politicians think. But no, Shirley, ask my daughter, she will tell you. I said to my secretary once, let's get a Huawei phone. She said, well, you're not smart enough to learn. I have to teach you a whole new phone system. But no, I know it's fantastic. My secretary will tell you it's fantastic. My daughter would tell you it's fantastic.
Takes good photos.
Yeah, well, everybody knows that, but Shirley, again, I am the wrong person to ask about technology. If my daughter weren't at school, you could ask her.
Well, you are a free soul. You've left the corporate world for a long time. If you were today put on the chair of, say, Lin Zhengfei's office, and you had to run this giant global company, what would you advise the company do differently? What would you advise the company to do next, possibly?
The first thing I would do for Huawei is I would resign because I'm hopeless. I would know nothing about what to do to help them. I would hire the best engineers I could from anywhere in the world, whether it's from American universities or India, wherever they are. I would hire the best engineers I could and say, do it, do it, do it, do it. No matter how crazy your ideas are, try it, and we will try it. Because many of them would fail. But I know, and the world knows, history shows, some of those crazy people could come up with astonishing new ideas and build even more astonishing companies. But I would go to the beach and I would get out of the way. I would just say, hire the smartest, nuttiest engineers you can and let them do what they want.
Well, I think we should give Jim some opportunities to go to the beach now. We've learned much from you and your insights. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Shirley, it's my pleasure. I'm a fan of you. I'm a fan of Huawei. I'm a fan of China. I'm also a fan of America. I hope that we all become more prosperous together in the future.
Absolutely. Fully agree. On that note, thank you so much.